Forgotten strength. The Galactic Council chamber was alive with light and sound, as delegates from dozens of worlds argued over the future of the spiral arm. The chamber itself was a ring of towering seats, each shaped for the physiology of its occupant, some scaled for beings that slithered, others for those who walked on 6 legs or floated on fields of energy. The voices rose and fell in a chorus of arrogance and certainty, each species claiming their wisdom was the highest. In one of the lowest tiers sat a single human, a diplomat named Arik, young compared to the gray-scaled reptilians and long-lived avians who spoke with the weight of centuries. His presence drew smirks and laughter, for humanity had not been active in galactic politics for generations. To the Council, Earth was a backwater world whose people lacked influence, a culture left behind in the rush of greater empires. Arik stood when his name was called, his simple uniform a stark contrast to the ornate robes and gleaming armor of the alien lords. The chamber grew quieter for a moment, not out of respect but curiosity, like predators watching a strange prey step into their den. He spoke in calm words, his voice carrying through the amplifiers. He reminded the Council that peace was fragile, and that strength lay not in mocking the smaller species but in remembering what history had already taught them. A ripple of derisive laughter swept through the hall, the delegates of the Vexari clicking their mandibles in amusement, the Gelthian elders hissing through their throat sacs, and the avian monarchs tilting their feathered heads as if considering a joke. One elder leaned forward, his scales glittering under the chamber lights, and demanded to know what lesson humanity could possibly offer the Council. Arik did not raise his voice, but his words carried weight. He said that long ago humans had faced extinction many times, and each time they survived, and not only survived but grew stronger. He said the galaxy had forgotten those lessons because it was easier to forget than to remember the cost of underestimating Earth. He said that though the Council believed humanity was weak, there were currents moving beneath the surface that they did not see. His words were not threats, but the tone carried a quiet warning, a promise that could not be laughed away. As he finished, the chamber erupted in mockery once more. Delegates clattered their claws, snapped their beaks, and hummed, with synthetic tones that mocked the human envoy. To them it was theater, a quaint moment in the day's politics, nothing more. Yet among the laughter, a few of the older delegates fell silent, their eyes dark with memory. They had heard stories from their ancestors about the wars of the early expansion, tales of human fleets burning across the stars, of soldiers who fought until the last breath, of resilience that no algorithm could calculate. Those whispers had been buried in archives and forgotten lectures, but now, listening to the humans' calm confidence, they stirred uneasily. Arik walked out of the chamber with his head high, ignoring the sneers that followed him. In the corridor, his small delegation of aides waited, a mix of humans and alien sympathizers who had seen enough to believe that Earth still carried a hidden flame. One aide asked if the Council had heard the message, and Arik smiled without humor. He said they had heard, but they had not listened, and that was always how it began. He reminded them that humanity had never asked for respect, but had always earned it the hard way. As they walked down the hall lined with banners of empires, he thought of the fleets hidden in silence, of colonies long ignored but thriving, of the training grounds where soldiers tested themselves against the harshest of environments. Outside, the grand city that housed the Council glittered with alien architecture, towers shaped like spirals of crystal and plazas where anti-gravity fountains shimmered. Ships soared through the skies in orderly patterns, and everywhere were the signs of civilizations confident in their superiority. Yet far above, beyond the orbit of the city's planet, a signal pulsed in the void, carrying a message across the stars to Earth and beyond. The message was simple, a single phrase encoded in layers of encryption, meant for human ears only. The galaxy has forgotten, and it is time they remember. That night, while the Council debated other matters and laughed at the human envoy's bold words, whispers spread among the diplomats' aides and the intelligence networks that fed on rumor. Some dismissed it as another attempt by Earth to cling to relevance. Others, more cautious, wondered why a species long absent would return now. In the shadows of the station, mercenaries and spies began asking questions, and old records were pulled from archives that had not been touched in centuries. The name of humanity, once thought to be fading into irrelevance, once more stirred unease. Arik looked at the stars through the viewport of his transport as it prepared to depart. His reflection stared back at him, steady and calm, but his thoughts burned with purpose. He knew the council thought him a fool, but history had always shown the same pattern. First came laughter, then disbelief, then fear, and finally respect. The first stage was complete, and the galaxy did not even realize it had begun. Echoes of fear. The days after Arik's speech were filled with mocking reports in the news channels that spanned the council's worlds. Commentators replayed his calm words alongside exaggerated laughter from the delegates, and across the core systems the image of the lone human envoy became the subject of endless jokes. Yet not everyone laughed. In the quiet corners of archives and libraries, researchers and elders began to sift through old records, dusty with neglect but alive with forgotten warnings. Among the oldest empires, whispers spread that humanity had not always been a minor voice at the galactic table, that there had been a time when even the strongest fleets hesitated before crossing Earth's path. The council had chosen to forget, because remembering had been too uncomfortable. On the second evening after the council session, a delegation of the Rilth, an aquatic species known for their memory keepers, met in secret in a dome filled with shifting water currents. They spoke in flowing tones about the records of human endurance during the siege of Korix, when a human fleet of only a dozen ships had held back an armada for weeks until allies arrived. The Rilth remembered how humans had fought with a ferocity that seemed impossible. Their ships damaged beyond repair yet still maneuvering. Their soldiers refusing to surrender even when all logic dictated they should have. One elder warned that mocking humanity was dangerous, for history had a way of repeating itself. The younger members dismissed the concern, saying that the humans of today were different, softer, more distracted by trade and comfort. Yet the seeds of unease had been planted. Across the galaxy, in the grand spire cities of the avian monarchs, another kind of conversation took place. Among the feathered aristocracy, historians debated whether the humans still trained their soldiers as they once had. One scholar recalled tales of humans who had marched across wastelands with no supplies and still won battles, driven not by genetic advantage, but by sheer will. Another pointed to human scientists who had crafted weapons out of scrap, turning every environment into a battlefield. These were not comfortable memories, and the council leaders preferred to pretend they were exaggerations. Still, those who studied the past could not ignore the feeling that something had been stirred awake. Arik himself was not idle. He spent his time after the council meeting moving between embassies and small gatherings, speaking with those few who still respected humanity. He reminded them that while Earth had withdrawn from galactic politics, it had never ceased building, never ceased training, never ceased preparing. He spoke of colonies that thrived in harsh systems where other species had failed, of explorers who crossed nebulae and black hole clusters without support, of scientists who pushed the boundaries of survival. He did not boast or threaten, but the conviction in his voice left a mark on those who listened. Some began to question whether the laughter of the council chamber had been a mask hiding fear. Meanwhile, the intelligence agencies of several great powers took note of strange signals moving through the dark channels of space. Encrypted messages, all carrying human signatures, traveled between systems that had long been quiet. Small fleets of civilian-looking ships vanished from trade routes, without explanation, and supply depots reported shortages of material that could be used for ship construction. Official reports dismissed these as coincidences, but in the back rooms where admirals and spy masters gathered, there was debate. One asked whether humanity was preparing for war. Another argued it was nothing more than posturing. Yet the oldest of them, with eyes dulled by years of service, said only that humanity never postured without reason. On worlds far from the council's light, common people spoke of humans differently. Merchants told stories of human traders who could cross the most dangerous routes without fear. Farmers remembered the resilience of human settlers who carved out homes on toxic worlds. Soldiers muttered about human mercenaries who seemed to rise stronger after every wound. These were small voices drowned out by the grandeur of the empires, but they carried a truth that echoed louder than laughter. The galaxy might laugh in its halls of power, but in the streets and colonies where survival was real, no one truly forgot what humans could endure. As the cycle of news and gossip turned, the council dismissed Arik's presence as a failed attempt to stir relevance. They declared that humanity would fade once more into obscurity. Yet the shadows of fear had already begun to lengthen. The council did not realize that the very act of laughter had reopened memories better left asleep. In the silence of space, where fleets prepared and soldiers trained, the pulse of something greater stirred. Humanity's name, once an afterthought, now whispered again in the corridors of power. The galaxy had not remembered fully, but it was beginning, and with every whisper came a tremor of unease that could not be silenced. The challenge. The council, amused by the whispers of human pride and the unease in their own archives, decided to put an end to the talk once and for all. They announced in a grand session that a series of trials would be held, open to all member species, to measure physical endurance, tactical intelligence, and resilience against hostile environments. Officially, the trials were framed as a celebration of galactic unity, but the tone carried sharp edges. Everyone knew the trials were aimed at exposing humanity's weakness in front of the galaxy. When the announcement was made, the delegates erupted with mocking approval, eager to see humans humbled in a public spectacle. Arik did not flinch when the challenge was issued. He returned to his delegation, transmitted the message to Earth, and within a cycle the human response was clear. They would not refuse. They would compete. Within days, transports began arriving at the council station carrying human soldiers, pilots, scientists, and even civilians who had volunteered. They wore no extravagant armor, no gleaming badges of honor, only simple uniforms marked with the flag of Earth. Their presence drew crowds of alien observers, who whispered and laughed as the humans walked the halls of the station with quiet purpose. The first trial was endurance. Competitors were placed on a barren moon orbiting a dead world, forced to survive with limited supplies, while completing grueling marches across jagged terrain. The council expected the humans to falter, to collapse under the crushing gravity and harsh winds. Instead, they endured. A human squad set out at dawn, their packs light, their steps steady, and though the sun scorched and the ground tore at their boots, they pushed forward. Other species fell behind, relying on advanced exosuits or robotic assistance, but when those machines failed in the dust storms, their owners cried for evacuation. The humans pressed on, faces set with determination, helping each other when one stumbled, refusing to abandon a single member. By the end of the trial, they had not only finished but completed it faster than any expected. Spectators who had come to laugh found themselves silent as the human squad marched across the finish line without a single casualty. The second trial was one of intellect. Teams were locked inside a simulated station under siege, forced to solve complex problems while under constant pressure from artificial crises. Systems failed, fires broke out, and the station's life support dwindled. Most teams panicked when multiple failures stacked on each other, arguing over priorities until time ran out. The human team did not. They divided tasks swiftly, patched systems with improvised tools, and used teamwork in a way the observers had not anticipated. At one point, when a reactor overload threatened the entire simulation, the human engineer rerouted power through a system the designers had not even considered, using instinct and daring to save the station. The overseers admitted later that the solution had been brilliant and unexpected. The humans did not just endure, they adapted, and they did so with a kind of reckless courage that unsettled those who watched. The third trial was combat. Non-lethal. Weapons were issued and squads were placed into a massive labyrinth to fight until only one remained. Species known for their strength and ferocity entered with confidence, certain they would overwhelm the human squad. What followed shocked the council. The humans moved with precision, never wasting movement, never panicking. They used the labyrinth itself as a weapon, setting traps, drawing enemies into ambushes, and striking with efficiency. One by one, the strongest warriors fell, not to brute strength but to cunning strategy. In the final match, when the last rival squad cornered them, the humans did not retreat. They advanced using coordination and timing to overwhelm their opponents despite being outnumbered. The crowd that had expected comedy instead witnessed a demonstration of skill that no one could deny. By the end of the trials, murmurs filled the council halls. The laughter had grown faint, replaced by nervous whispers. Reports spread quickly, carried to worlds across the galaxy. Commentators tried to dismiss the victories as chance, but those who had witnessed the trials firsthand knew the truth. Humanity had not come to posture or beg for respect. They had come to remind the galaxy of what they were. Arik stood before the council once more after the trials. His presence no longer met with the same derision as before. He did not boast or claim superiority. He simply asked whether the council had seen enough to remember. His question hung heavy in the chamber, and though many still wanted to laugh, the sound caught in their throats. For the first time in generations, the galaxy had begun to wonder if the humans they mocked were the same humans their ancestors had feared. The council had sought to expose weakness, but instead they had revealed a strength that could not be ignored. Shadows of war. The victories in the trials sent ripples through the galaxy that the council could not contain. News feeds replayed the images of humans surviving the barren moon, repairing the simulated station, and dominating the labyrinth. What had been planned as a spectacle of humiliation had transformed into a showcase of power, and though commentators tried to downplay it, no one could erase the memory of human determination. In quiet meetings behind closed doors, admirals and strategists began to whisper to one another. They spoke of the dangerous precedent being set, of the possibility that humans might rise again to a level of influence that would threaten the balance of power. The mocking tone of the council chamber was gone now, replaced by calculation and unease. It was during this uneasy silence that reports arrived of strange activity on the galactic border. Merchant convoys spoke of massive ships moving through uncharted sectors, dark silhouettes that did not broadcast identification codes. At first, officials dismissed the stories as exaggeration, the wild tales of traders eager to inflate their own importance. But when sensor buoys along the rim detected power signatures consistent with warship engines, the council was forced to pay attention. When analysts examined the data more closely, the realization struck like a thunderbolt. The ships were human. They were not the aging frigates and outdated cruisers that most believed Earth still relied on. These were vessels built for war, sleek and silent, with hulls black as the void, and weapons arrays that rivaled the fleets of great empires. The council demanded an explanation, summoning Arik once more to stand before them. He listened calmly to the accusations that humanity was building a secret fleet in violation of council treaties. He answered simply that humanity had never agreed to be defenseless, that survival demanded preparation, and that if the council had forgotten this, then perhaps it was the council that was unwise. His words stirred outrage among some delegates, but others sat in uneasy silence, remembering old wars and old scars. While politicians debated, alien admirals studied the footage of the human ships with growing dread. They noted how the vessels moved in perfect silence, their drives masked with technology that suggested years of refinement. They saw the patterns of their patrols and realized they were not random at all, but part of a vast exercise, a rehearsal of war conducted just beyond the council's reach. When a fleet of these ships emerged briefly from hyperspace near the Star of Tarvan, and then vanished again before sensors could track them, the admirals understood the message. Humanity was not only alive and strong, it was ready. Among the council, worlds' fear began to spread. Merchants worried about trade routes, colonists whispered about human raids, and rulers debated whether to unite against Earth before it was too late. Yet none could agree, for humanity had not declared war, had not fired a single shot. They had only shown their strength, and it was enough to fracture the council into factions. Some demanded immediate military action to crush the human fleet before it grew larger, while others argued for caution, warning that any move against Earth might unleash a conflict greater than the council could contain. In the shadow of these debates, human operatives moved quietly. They met with sympathetic species who had grown tired of council arrogance. forging alliances in secret. They gathered intelligence on the fleets and weapons of rival empires, charting weaknesses and opportunities. On remote worlds, human soldiers, trained in silence, preparing for scenarios that no one outside their command understood. It was not bluster or bravado, but careful preparation guided by the lessons of history. Arik himself grew more deliberate in his appearances. He no longer pressed humanity's case with words alone. Instead, he let the rumors and sightings of the black ships speak louder than anything he could say. When delegates mocked him, he merely smiled and asked whether they had checked their borders lately. The question silenced many of his critics, for too many had seen or heard something they could not explain. The council chamber that once rang with laughter now echoed with tension. In the skies above the council capital, life went on as normal. Ships came and went, markets bustled, and the towers of glass and crystal glittered in the sun. Yet beneath, the surface, every shadow seemed to hold suspicion. Every whisper seemed to carry a warning. The galaxy was beginning to realize that humanity had not returned to seek approval or recognition. They had returned because they had decided it was time, and the council could do nothing to stop it. Far beyond the reach of the council's sensors, deep in a hidden dock orbiting a nameless world, the newest human dreadnought came online. Its engines glowed with power as its crew took their stations. The captain looked out into the void and gave the order to move into formation with the rest of the fleet. Across the stars, more ships joined them, black silhouettes against the eternal night, waiting for the command that would change everything. The council still argued, still mocked, still hesitated, but the shadows of war were already falling. Humanity had prepared for this moment, and soon the galaxy would remember why forgetting human power had always been a mistake. The spark ignites. The tension in the council chamber reached a breaking point when the Trellnock Dominion, a proud and arrogant species known for their aggression, decided that words and warnings meant nothing. Their leaders believed that the only way to prove humanity's weakness was through action, and so they struck. Without declaring war, without even a pretense of negotiation, a Trellnock fleet swept down upon a small human colony on the edge of the rim. The colony was little more than a mining settlement with modest defenses, a world of families, engineers, and workers who had come to carve a living out of the stone and dust. The Dominion thought it would be an easy conquest, a way to humiliate humanity in front of the galaxy. They were wrong. When the Trellnock ships appeared in orbit, the colony did not surrender. Instead, they activated defenses that had been quietly prepared for years. Hidden rail cannons emerged from the cliffs. Automated drones swarmed into the skies, and emergency bunkers sealed shut as civilians were guided underground. The first wave of attackers was met with a wall of fire that tore through their shields and forced them into retreat. Even when more ships descended, the colonists refused to break. They were not soldiers, yet every man, woman, and child followed. Protocols drilled into them for years. Humanity had never allowed its frontier worlds to be defenseless. The Dominion had expected to find victims, but they found survivors who fought with the stubbornness of their ancestors. The battle raged for hours. Eventually, overwhelmed by numbers, the colony's defenses faltered, but not before the distress signal had been sent. The message was clear and simple. Attacked without cause, under siege, requesting aid. That signal reached the nearest human fleet within moments, and the response was swift. The black warships that the Council had whispered about finally revealed themselves. They dropped out of hyperspace in silence, their hulls glimmering faintly against the light of the system's star. The Dominion fleet turned to meet them with confidence, believing their numbers were enough. But they had never faced the new strength of humanity. The human ships did not rush forward with reckless fury. They advanced with calm precision, every movement measured, every shot deliberate. Their weapons struck with terrifying accuracy, carving through Trellnock shields as if they were made of glass. The Dominion captains tried to adapt, tried to rally their fleets, but their formations shattered under the human assault. In less than an hour, what had been a proud fleet lay broken and scattered, wreckage burning in the void. Humanity did not destroy them all. They allowed survivors to flee, carrying the story of what they had seen back to the rest of the galaxy. The message was clear. Humanity did not start wars, but they would finish them. When news of the battle reached the Council, the chamber erupted into chaos. Some species cried out that the humans had shown their true nature, violent and dangerous, as ever. Others whispered in awe at the precision of the human response, noting that they had not unleashed devastation indiscriminately, but had acted with discipline and restraint. For every voice that condemned Earth, another urged caution. The Trellnok had provoked the fight, and humanity had merely answered. What frightened the Council most was how easily the humans had answered, how quickly they had crushed an enemy fleet that should have been formidable. In the streets of the Council capital, common citizens began to speak of humans with a mixture of fear and respect. Merchants told each other that human trade convoys would now be untouchable. Soldiers of other species muttered that they would never want to meet a human in battle. Even the children of distant colonies played games where they pretended to be human warriors standing unbroken against impossible odds. The spark had been lit, and the fire was spreading faster than anyone could contain. Arik stood once more before the Council, summoned to explain the actions of his people. He did not raise his voice or offer apologies. He told them that humanity had not sought the fight but would never allow its colonies to be slaughtered. He said that the Dominion had tested them, and the result had been clear. His words were simple, but behind them lay an unspoken truth that the Council could not ignore. If one human fleet could shatter the Dominion so completely, what else might humanity be hiding? The galaxy watched in silence as the news spread from world to world. The laughter that had once followed every mention of humanity was gone now, replaced by the heavy weight of realization. The spark that the Dominion had struck had not just ignited a battle, it had reignited humanity's place in the galaxy. And as the smoke of the shattered fleet drifted through the void, every empire understood that the age of forgetting was over. Humanity was awake once more, and the stars would burn if they were challenged again. The Great Reckoning, the destruction of the Trellnok fleet, did not end the matter. It began a storm that rolled across the Council chambers and echoed into every empire. Delegates shouted over one another, their voices rising in fear and fury, each demanding an answer to the question that none dared to speak aloud. Should humanity be destroyed before it rose too high again, or should the Council finally admit that Earth had reclaimed its place among the powers of the galaxy? The debate split the chamber into two factions, one driven by terror of human resurgence, the other by a wary respect for the discipline shown in the colony's defense. Admirals from the strongest fleets presented reports filled with uneasy detail. They revealed how human ships had not just matched the Dominion's strength, but had surpassed it with frightening efficiency. They pointed out the strange silence in human military communications, the precision of their movements, the technology hidden beneath their blackened hulls. One admiral spoke of intelligence reports suggesting that humanity had been building these fleets in secret for decades, training officers and soldiers away from the Council's gaze, waiting patiently for the moment the galaxy's arrogance left it vulnerable. The silence in the chamber grew heavy when he concluded that no other species could match such patience and preparation. Whispers spread of alliances being forged in the shadows. Small nations long oppressed by Council arrogance reached out to human envoys eager to align themselves with a power that had proven it could stand against giants. Even some who had once mocked Earth now reconsidered their stance, wondering if perhaps it was safer to stand beside humanity than against it. The balance of the galaxy was shifting, not through treaties or decrees, but through fear and memory. Every empire remembered fragments of stories from their past, stories of wars where humans had stood unyielding, stories of soldiers who never surrendered, stories of explorers who survived the unsurvivable. The stories were no longer myth. They were alive again, and the proof was written in the wreckage of the Trellnok fleet. Arik moved through the political chaos with quiet purpose. He met with sympathetic delegates in dim corridors, offering not threats but assurances. He told them that humanity did not seek to dominate the galaxy, only to ensure survival and respect. Yet he also made it clear that survival for Earth meant never bending the knee again. His calm words carried more weight than any shouted decree, for everyone who heard him knew the power that now stood behind his voice. In his eyes they saw not arrogance but certainty, the certainty of a people who had prepared for centuries, while the galaxy mocked them. Meanwhile, deep within hidden human strongholds, the full scope of their preparation began to surface. Vast training grounds on death worlds had hardened soldiers against the most hostile environments. Research facilities buried beneath oceans and frozen wastes had developed weapons no other empire had imagined. Fleets drilled in silence, perfecting tactics that relied not on sheer numbers but on adaptability and cunning. Spies from rival empires who managed to catch glimpses of this machinery of war returned shaken, whispering that humanity had been waiting, always waiting, for the day they would be tested again. The Council tried to contain the panic, but every attempt failed. Colonies on the edge of space began preparing their defenses not against humans but in fear of being caught in the storm of war that might come. Merchants rerouted their convoys, cautious of traveling too close to human systems. Even mighty empires, that had once considered themselves unshakable, now strengthened their borders and recalled fleets from distant campaigns. It was as though the entire galaxy sensed that a reckoning was coming, and no one wished to be unprepared. Still, some voices in the Council clung to arrogance. They demanded a united strike to eliminate the human threat before it could grow further. They argued that Earth was still a single world with scattered colonies, not yet strong enough to withstand the might of all the empires combined. But their words faltered when faced with the memories of the Trellnock defeat, and with rumors that the Black Fleet's humanity had revealed were only a fraction of their true strength. No one could say with certainty how many ships Earth had hidden, how many soldiers trained in silence, how many allies waited to rise at the right moment. In the Council's great chamber, the debate raged until exhaustion silenced it. No resolution was reached, no plan agreed upon. Humanity had forced the galaxy into hesitation, and hesitation was the one thing they could not afford. The Council had forgotten the lesson of human strength, and now they remembered too late. Humanity did not need to declare war. By revealing what they had become, they had already changed the galaxy. As the chamber emptied, Arik stood alone for a moment, gazing up at the banners of 100 empires fluttering in the artificial wind. He knew that fear had taken root, and once fear spread, it could never be undone. The galaxy was caught between choosing to fight humanity or to respect them, and either path would lead to a new age. Humanity had prepared for this reckoning, and now it had arrived. In silence and in patience, they had built the foundation of their return, and soon the galaxy would learn that forgetting human power had been the greatest mistake of all. Humanity remembered. The Council reconvened under a tension so thick that even the most arrogant delegates sat in uneasy silence. The banners of the great empires hung heavy above them, symbols of power that had once seemed eternal. Yet now those symbols felt fragile in the shadow of humanity's resurgence. No one laughed when Arik entered the chamber. No mocking tones followed his footsteps. The memory of the trials, the destruction of the Trellnock fleet, and the whispers of black warships moving like shadows through the void weighed on them all. Humanity had not demanded respect, but respect had been forced upon them. The debate began once more, voices rising as factions argued over the future. Some called for immediate peace, fearing that any provocation would lead to catastrophe. Others demanded that a united strike be launched, believing humanity too dangerous to coexist with. Yet those voices wavered, for the memory of human resilience was no longer buried in dusty archives but alive in the present. For every voice demanding war, another reminded the chamber of what had already happened when a fleet challenged Earth. They had been broken in an hour, scattered and humiliated, and humanity had not even used its full strength. Arik stood when called to speak. His voice was steady, carrying no malice yet no apology. He reminded the Council that humanity had not attacked first, that the Dominion had provoked them, and that the response had been measured, not vengeful. He said humanity did not seek conquest or domination, but survival and respect, and survival for Earth meant never allowing itself to be mocked or dismissed again. He told them the galaxy had forgotten, But forgetting was no longer possible. The words settled in the chamber like stone, undeniable in their weight. Outside the halls of politics, the galaxy itself shifted. Colonies once ignored now rallied behind Earth. Small nations reached out in secret alliances, seeing humanity as a shield against the arrogance of the larger empires. Even within the mighty fleets of the council races, soldiers whispered among themselves that they would rather fight alongside a human than against one. Merchants spoke of human convoys that crossed dangerous sectors with fearless precision, and civilians told stories of human colonists who stood unbroken against overwhelming odds. The laughter that had once followed the name of humanity had turned into stories told with awe and fear, stories that spread faster than any council decree could contain. In the council capital, murals and broadcasts had once shown humanity as a minor, quaint people. Now those same images were replaced with somber reports, debates, and even reluctant tributes to their resilience. No empire could ignore the truth any longer. Humanity was awake, and their strength was not a relic of the past but a force of the present. The very balance of the galaxy had shifted in silence, not through conquest but through demonstration. The memory of what humans were had returned, and it had shaken the foundation of galactic order. Deep in space, the black fleets waited. They did not parade or boast. They trained in silence, every crew knowing that their very existence was enough to keep the galaxy uncertain. Their captains drilled tirelessly, preparing for battles that might never come, but ensuring that if they did, humanity would not falter. In hidden bases, scientists perfected new technologies, weapons that could alter the course of war, shields that could withstand barrages, engines that could leap farther and faster than any other. Humanity did not flaunt these achievements, for they knew that mystery was as powerful as fire. Back on Earth, the people watched the stars with pride. They had endured centuries of ridicule, years of silence, and decades of preparation. Now their children grew up knowing that the galaxy feared their name once more, not because of terror but because of respect forged in the fires of history. Humanity had reclaimed its place, not through conquest but by forcing the galaxy to remember. The Riomar Council, once a place of arrogance and derision, now faced its greatest challenge. They had to decide whether to embrace humanity as an equal or to live forever in fear of its return to war. Auric left them with a final reminder, spoken not as a threat, but as a truth carved in the bones of his people. He told them that humanity had always been underestimated, always mocked, always dismissed, and every time it had risen stronger than before. He said that those who forget the strength of Earth invite their own downfall, for history would repeat itself as it always had. The chamber fell into silence. No one laughed, no one sneered. For the first time in generations, the galaxy remembered. Humanity's name carried weight again, not because of diplomacy, not because of begging for recognition, but because they had proven themselves where it mattered. The council bowed not out of choice but out of necessity, and the stars themselves seemed to acknowledge the shift. From that day forward, no one forgot. The age of mockery was over. The galaxy would move forward with humanity at its center, a reminder carved into every mind that to forget human power was to invite its return. The era of silence was gone, and in its place rose the era of remembrance. Humanity remembered who they were, and now the galaxy remembered too. The legacy of remembrance. The stars stretched endless above the council world as Auric stood at the viewport of his ship preparing to depart. The chamber behind him had ended in silence. No votes, no decrees, only the weight of realization pressing upon every delegate who had once mocked his people. The galaxy now knew what had been hidden in the dark, that humanity had never been weak, that they had been waiting, watching, preparing until the day the council forgot enough to tempt fate. Auric felt no triumph, only a quiet satisfaction that the warning had been heard, for his people had not returned to beg or to boast, but to remind, and the reminder had struck deeper than any weapon. In the void, the black fleets waited in formation, disciplined and patient, their engines humming softly against the silence of space. They did not need to fire a single shot now, for their presence alone was enough to reshape the galaxy. Every admiral of every empire recalculated their strategies. Every ruler reconsidered their alliances, and every soldier whispered the same truth, that the humans who had once been dismissed as relics had returned as the most dangerous force, alive. Fear mingled with respect, and respect was the one currency that had always mattered most. On Earth, the people gathered in their cities and settlements, watching the transmissions flow in from across the stars. No longer were they the butt of alien jokes. No longer were their achievements buried in forgotten archives. The young looked to the skies with pride, knowing that the legacy of survival had not been wasted, that the sacrifices of their ancestors had carved a place for them in the great expanse. Farmers, workers, scientists, and soldiers all carried the same quiet certainty that the galaxy had been forced to remember, and once remembered, it could never again pretend to forget. The Council. Might argue for years, empires might plot and whisper, but the tide had already shifted. Humanity had not needed to conquer planets or burn fleets to ash. They had shown themselves, and that had been enough. The galaxy had witnessed endurance in the trials, brilliance in strategy, resilience in survival, and precision in battle. These were not accidents or spectacles. They were the essence of what it meant to be human, and now every empire understood that truth once more. As Arik's ship lifted away from the Council world, he looked down upon the glittering towers won last time. He thought of the day he had first stepped into that chamber to laughter and derision, and he compared it to the silence that had followed his final words. He knew the galaxy would never laugh at Earth again. The echoes of fear had become the foundation of respect, and respect would keep the stars in balance for generations to come. The void opened before him, endless and vast, but no longer lonely. For the first time in centuries, humanity was not forgotten, and that remembrance would shape the future. He whispered a message into the silence, not for the Council, but for his people, that the age of humiliation was over, and the age of remembrance had begun. The end.